1, 2, 3. Kia ora, I'm Tiara, and I will talk to you about the social and political contents that Irihapeti lived in.
Hey, I'm Rachel, and I'm going to be talking about the health issues and the causes between the 1980s and the 1990s.
Kia ora, my name's Asia, and I'm going to talk to you about the actions that Irihapeti took to improve Māori health.
Oh hey there, my name is Patu, and my discussion was focused on how the culture safety guidelines cheapen the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi.
Kia ora, I'm Dania. I will be telling you about how we can take what Irihapeti has done and implement it into modern day society.
In the 1960s to 1990s, you see an influx of Māori moving from rural areas to urban. Māori were encouraged by the government to migrate to these areas to work mainly in manufacturing and agricultural related industries. 62% of Māori were living in these areas in 1966, and we see a rapid increase to 83% by 1986. A key social movement that was established during this time was the Māori Women's Welfare League. The league was established in 1951. The Māori Women's Welfare League was based at a conference in Wellington where they discussed many issues that Māori faced post-World War. For example, housing, health, and education. The league focused on the families and the promotion of healthy lifestyles, as well as issues related specifically to Māori women. During this time, health issues such as immunisation, family planning, obesity and tuberculosis, as well as just domestic violence, were key concerns for Māori. The League helped initiate programs targeting Māori health. For example, they set up healthy lifestyle programs and released reports related to the health of Māori and Māori women. The League became involved in the provision of health and wellbeing services for families across New Zealand at a regional level in the 1990s and the 2000s. Another issue for Māori was land. The land march at Bastion Point, which was led by Joe Hawke between 1977 and 1978, highlights the issue that Māori face with land. The Waitangi Tribunal was established in 1975. The tribunal was formed to investigate the grievances that Māori had. The tribunal began hearings in 1977, which investigated grievances and claims that Māori had, which dated back to 1840.
As a result of a number of causative factors, many health issues existed for Māori in the 1980s and 1990s, which culminated in large health inequities between Māori and non-Māori. The gap between Māori and non-Māori mortality rates widened over the 1980s and 1990s. All other ethnicities had decreasing mortality rates over this time, but Māori remained consistently higher. Cardiovascular mortality was 3 times higher in Māori males compared to non-Māori males, and 4.2 times higher in Māori females compared to non-Māori females. Māori respiratory diseases were higher than all non-Māori ethnicities. This was linked to higher incidence of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is attributable to tobacco consumption. Suicide rates increased significantly between the 1980s and the 1990s, especially in the 15 to 44-year-old age group. Māori males had a 70% greater suicide rate than non-Māori males in this age group. Chronic diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and respiratory diseases combine with injury to form the main contributors of Māori's lower life expectancy. There are 3 types of barriers which contribute to the health issues that Māori experienced during this time. These are organisational barriers, human resource level barriers, and individual and community level barriers. Organisational barriers include timing and availability of services, Western healthcare approaches, and a disproportionate number of Māori in health professional positions. Human resource level barriers include non-Māori staff attitudes and perceptions of Māori patients, and a lack of patient-provider communication. Individual and community level barriers include being in a lower socio-economic position and patient attitudes, beliefs and preferences that contribute to the idea of healthcare as being inappropriate, not a priority, or something to be feared.
Irihapeti was a change-driven woman who focused on reducing disparities for Māori.
Her main interests involved the urban experience for Māori people and the development of identity and confidence towards Māori achievement. She embedded cultural safety training for nurses, which became mandatory and made up 20% of New Zealand nursing and midwifery courses. In addition, she created the Cultural Safety Guidelines in 1991, which were then published and implemented in 1992 across New Zealand. Another primary focus of hers was to facilitate workshops on treaty issues and decolonisation. This involves addressing the intergenerational trauma and racial supremacy. The three core principles in the cultural safety guidelines she created are cultural safety, cultural sensitivity, and cultural awareness. Cultural safety involves providing safe services, which is decided by those that receive the services. Cultural safety is underpinned by communication, recognition of the diversity in worldviews, and the impact of colonisation on minority groups. Cultural sensitivity is being aware that cultural differences and similarities between people exist without assigning them a value, positive or negative, better or worse, right or wrong. It simply means that you are aware that people are not all the same and that you recognise that your culture is no better than other culture, a challenge for members of dominant cultures. Cultural awareness is understanding there are many factors that affect a person. For example, emotional, social, economic, and political effects, and using this to strengthen your approach towards people. Each principle is interconnected and applicable in every health setting and benefits all people while increasing health outcomes. Irihapeti's actions have led the way to holistic and cultural competent practices that made a massive difference not only for Māori, but all cultures, genders and religions. She recognised that Māori have little control over funding, policy and delivery of health services. However, she did what she could to empower her people and make a positive change.
Te tiriti o Waitangi. The Treaty of Waitangi serves as an integral part to our health and well-being. To provide historical context and a source of origin for where we see health today, health deterioration was a major factor throughout the New Zealand Society of 1837. British resident Busby identified the miserable condition of Māori health as a result of European impact within his proposal of a British protectorate. The treaty acknowledged the responsibility of the Crown and their protective role of citizenship rights, ensuring that Māori control and management over Māori resources were not removed from the treaty. It is these provisions that are regarded as pivotal to the treaty's implications for healthcare and health services. Participation, protection and partnership are the three main principles detailed in the 3 articles of the treaty that address the relationship between Māori and the Crown and the obligations and responsibilities of both parties. It is important to mention that Indigenous sovereignty, kāwanatanga, and self-determination, tino rangatiratanga, are considered to be determinants of health. So incorporating the principles of the treaty into our health service frameworks and guidelines considers Māori cultural concepts as being essential in the management of health and well-being. Irihapeti recognised the significance of this document to inform cultural appropriate practices within health services today, holding health sectors accountable for their level of cultural competency and cultural safety frameworks. To take it further, she centralised this founding document into the core of her cultural safety guidelines. This provides a platform to discuss how the cultural safety guidelines strengthen the principles of the treaty. Principle 1, tino rangatiratanga, enabling Māori self-determination over health, recognising the right to manage Māori interests and affirms the right to development. This involves enabling Māori autonomy and authority over health, facilitating Māori to define knowledge and worldviews and transmit these in their own ways. Principle 2, partnership. This involves nurses working together with Māori with the mutual aim of improving health outcomes for Māori. Working together with an agreed common purpose, interest and cooperation to achieve positive health outcomes, and ensuring that the integrity and well-being of both partners is preserved. Principle 3. The nursing workforce recognises that health is a taonga and acts to protect it. This is through recognising that Māori health is worthy of protection in order to achieve positive health outcomes and improvement in health status, and ensuring that health services and delivery are appropriate and acceptable to individuals and their families and are underpinned by the recognition that Māori are a diverse population. Principle 4. The nursing workforce recognises the citizen rights of Māori and the rights to equitable access and participation in health services and delivery at all levels through facilitating the same access and opportunities for Māori as there are for non-Māori and pursuing equality in health outcomes. Through Irihapeti's movements and influence, we can learn a lot about Māori leadership and advocacy for Māori rights. She acts as an influential role model for change in the way Māori are viewed and how Māori values and concepts are incorporated into nursing and into wider health services. From her movements, we can appreciate the inclusion of cultural competence in health facilities, and from this we can learn how we as future health practitioners can use these guidelines in our practices. This can also help us to recognise how we as Māori can expect to be treated correctly and understandably when experiencing healthcare. Through her movements, we can also understand how including our voice and speaking out about our beliefs and values can have an influence on decisions regarding our personal health, whānau health, and the health of our community. She also created the opportunity for us as Māori to feel confident in our identity, our past and our future, and to use our knowledge for the betterment of our people. Through her actions, we can find encouragement in continuing to seek and discover opportunities for Māori and to create opportunities for our future generations.
Irihapeti was a district nurse, and she once said, "As a charge nurse with some type of authority, I realised that the major rights of patients was to inform about their healthcare and noticed that, as a health professional, they were manipulating information for reasons that related more to their needs for routine and control that they did to empowerment instead of the empowerment of patients," which led to my desire to focus on cultural safety guidelines for nurses and engaging with Māori.
Thanks for listening. Ka kite anō.